Okay. I will call to order the Sierra Madre Planning Commission of January 17th. Can we have roll call?
Yes, Chair Hutt.
Here.
Vice Chair Dennison. Commissioners Catalano.
Here.
Desai. Friarman Hunt.
Here.
Hetzner. And Spears.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we will move on. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can we get a motion?
So moved. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Next is approval of minutes of our regular meeting of December 6th. Any comments or corrections?
No objection.
I'll move that we approve them.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously as well. Next, we'll move to audience comments. If there's anybody in the audience who would like to address the commission on something that is not on the Planning Commission agenda for this evening, please come down, state your name, and let us hear you.
Marguerite Schuster, 675 Mount Wilson Trail. A number of weeks ago, Chairman Hutt, I think with some general consent, suggested that it would be helpful if, when projects were continued, the date of the upcoming hearing be posted on the notice board on the property. I noticed that that has not been happening, and it would make life easier for me, for one, if actually it could be made to happen. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think that's really important.
Right, I think especially on
We get it done.
on some of these projects where we continue for quite a while, and sometimes, you know, it especially if you go over the holidays, you need quite a while to do these, but they can get lost in the shuffle, and so that's a useful thing.
Sometimes I'm wondering if the city just forgot to come around and take the sign down.
Well, the thing is, the
It's up
city
to the
doesn't do it.
applicant.
It's up to the applicant, and we do tell the applicant to put the date on the notice signboard that was there from the prior meeting. We did notice, and we did tell the applicants at one of them that is being continued that it had fallen down and it still needed to be updated. So yes,
Yeah.
we're aware of that. This project is, when we get to it, we'll address it.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else? Okay, with that, we'll move to the public hearings. Our first public hearing is Hillside Development Permit 1202, which I think we're going to continue. Do we need a motion on that, or?
We do need a motion on this. It was continued from the December 6, 2018 meeting to this evening's meeting, and we are going to be continuing that item to the February 2nd meeting. Our 7th meeting.
Is that the same meeting that the other One Carter House is coming?
It is.
Okay, good. So we'll have a full plate. Okay.
And are they going to be?
Do you need a motion?
Yes, we do.
I also move.
Okay.
I second that.
And if we could have a friendly amendment to that you could remind the applicant to put that date on the board, that would be, notice board, that would be great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Next, we'll move to our second public hearing item, Design Review Permit 1803. Do we have a staff report?
We have a staff report and presentation this evening. Claire Lynn, our associate planner, will be giving the presentation. We have a PowerPoint, so you may want to adjust your
Okay.
charts.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Planning Commission will be reviewing a design review permit 1803 for the property located at 193 Oak Meadow Road. The subject property is located outlined in red on the west side of the Oak Meadow Road, a cul-de-sac street north of Orange Grove Boulevard in the residential R1 zone. Property is a 19,706 square feet rectangular lot. Immediate neighboring properties are one-story single-family residence. Here are the photos of the existing structures, and at the front elevation, which is the east elevation, you can see the Coast Live Oak on the perimeters to the south. Additional photos taken from the property looking across the street and the side yard north elevation and the view of the front from the front gate. Here are photos with the proposed project outlined it at the rear yard and the side yard, the south view. Here are the photos of the existing pool deck and the garage with the outline of the shop behind the garage. Applicant is requesting Planning Commission to consider a design review permit to demolish the existing 1,907 square feet structure to allow construction of a new single-family, one-story, 3,503 square feet single home with the addition of 297 square feet shop attached to the existing garage, and to reduce the cumulative side yard setback from 30% to 27%. Design review permit is required pursuant to the code to allow any new constructions with allowable gross floor area for all structures on a single lot exceeds 3,500 square feet of floor area. And the approval of design review permit is required for new construction of primary structure to allow reduced cumulative side yard setback dimension of not less than 20% of the width of the lot. Applicant is proposing to demolish the existing residence that was built in 1947. The structure is less than 75 years old, therefore is not subject to the discretionary demolition ordinance, and historic resources evaluation report is not required. Proposed project has met all requirements by code, lot coverage, building height, gross floor area are below than what is allowed. With one note that applicant is applying for the design review permit to reduce the cumulative side yard setback from setback to 27%, which is not less than 20%. Existing 3-car garage is provided to accommodate the 2 space that's required. Applicant has also prepared a survey on the linear block showing that the prevailing front yard setback is at 40 feet and the proposed 10 and 9-foot side yard setbacks are greater or equal to the neighboring properties. Also here shows the height of the proposed structure is lower than the neighboring properties. Applicant did a sample size of 33 neighboring properties that were notified within the 300-foot radius, and proposed habitable square footage of 3,272 square feet is consistent with the average of the top 1/3 in the neighborhood. A comprehensive arborist report has been prepared to evaluate the health and condition of the 2 30-inch Coast Live Oak at the perimeter of the site to provide mitigation and protective measure. It is the arborist's opinion that both oak on site can be conserved, and the arborist should perform a root crown excavation and inspection, a tree structure climbing inspection, and keep all construction and landscape material and equipment away from the base of the oak's root zone. And possibly installing a short retaining wall to retain the soil within the root zone, and demolition work should be done from within the footprint of the existing house. Arbor's recommendations and general guidelines are to be followed. Applicant also prepare a landscaping plan with drought-tolerant plant palette and a low-impact development with best management plan. Applicant is proposing a project that works with the existing south and east foundation lines to minimize earthwork. Proposed project is to maintain the single-story character of the neighborhood. And by using the design features, colors, and material finishes to impart a hacienda design aesthetic. The residence is designed in Spanish hacienda architectural style with a low-pitched terracotta barrel tile roof, emphasized on the front and rear arcade veranda with framed in exposed wood timbers staying a dark brown color. Exterior deep recessed windows with thick wall using Santa Barbara style plaster surfaces with warm earth tone color. Exterior floor is detailed with Della Robbia bond, a weave brick pattern, and a hand-painted tiles to match the elements from the existing pool and deck. Here's the site plan that shows the location of the 2 oaks and the footprint of the existing driveway, existing structures, and the proposed structures are shown in darker outline, utilizing the same foundation lines at the south and the east corner. Also shows the existing garage is set back 136 feet from the front property line, and the proposed addition is behind the garage. Here is the proposed landscape plan with drought-tolerant plant palette, and the parkway will remain as existing. Landscape irrigation plan is designed into hydro zones to maximize water irrigation efficiency for each plant type. And the proposed low-impact development plan shows underground infiltration basin will be utilizing the 105-foot wide front yard. Here is the floor plan. Remain as 3-bedroom home with 4 bathrooms, 1 living, 1 dining, and 1 family room. Fireplace and chimney are proposed to be remain. Elevations, the east elevation showing the front elevation with the simple gable roof structure. The west elevation is the rear elevation showing the rear arcaded veranda that is facing the existing pool. South elevation and north elevation with the casement windows and high awning windows. The top of the roof is at 16 feet 11 inches. Plans of the existing garage and the shop addition will use the same Spanish terracotta tile roof, and the exterior wall surfaces will detail to match the proposed residence. Here is the photo montage renderings of the street from the street elevation, and showing both sides of the neighbor. 3D renderings of the front elevation and the views from the 4 corners, showing the recessed windows with the timber lintel above the windows and the covered arcade with terracotta attic clay vent tubes, and also the Spanish style square glass block. Here is the renderings of the garage with the workshop addition. Samples of the proposed colors and materials that will be used for this project includes the color for the wood surfaces, the warm earth tone colors for the plaster wall, custom hand-painted tiles, Spanish terracotta tile roof, resembling the elements from the existing pools and deck. Design review permit findings have to be made in order to approve the project. These findings are in the packet for Planning Commission to make decision. Alternative before Planning Commission this evening is to approve the design review permit pursuant to Resolution 18-11, or approve with modification or deny the project and identify the findings that Commission feel cannot be made under these basis for rejecting those findings, or continue the project and provide applicant with further direction. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission take the following action pursuant to Resolution 18-11, which included in the packet as Attachment A to approve application for the Design Review Permit 1803, subject to the conditions of approval. That concludes my presentations. They are supporting letters in front of you. And the applicant is here to answer any questions you might have, and I will answer any questions you might have for staff.
I'm also going to pass around the material board for your review.
Okay. Do the commissioners have any questions for staff?
I have one. There was the low impact development plan was part of our report, and I hadn't seen that in previous reports.
The low impact development plan, it does include the calculations that you see. Typically what we receive is just a general indication of where the retention basins will be located. In this case, these were sized specifically to accommodate the surface area runoff that's derived from all the solid surfaces on the property. And this is something that is generally seen by our city engineer during plan check. That's a plan check requirement. The applicant had it and wanted to include it in the plan.
So this is normally something that it's done for everything. We just have never seen it before.
Right.
Okay.
I'd like to note that there's no such thing as Spanish tile glass block. What's the... will the applicant be able to tell us which type of glass block it is? There are a number of different styles.
Made in Madrid.
Thanks. I'd like to find out, just to complete the imagery, what the particular type of glass block is that's being proposed. But there's no Spanish glass block.
Do we know if the arborists saw the low-impact development plan?
I do not. We can ask the applicant.
Like they did, and I'm just wondering if that's going to affect the tree.
Yeah, I think that as you guys brought up, the low impact plan was really helpful. Understand how these processes work, and I think the retention basins are a great idea. I just want to make sure that that one that's somewhat close to the oak tree isn't going to cause any problems with the oak tree. Right. The other question or issue I had was that when we do these size comparisons with the neighborhood, it's always based on habitable size because that's the data that you can get from the county. And usually that's a pretty fair comparison because the non-habitable space is roughly the same. And most houses have a 2-car garage, so you get tack on 400 square feet. And I drove the neighborhood, and most of the ones I saw have a 400 square foot garage. But even if you count for some with 3-car garage or other shops, this house has over 1,000 square feet of non-habitable space. So I think that the the neighborhood comparison is perhaps a little misleading as it is. And I think we really need to adjust. And I'm not saying we should go and try to figure out this exact square footage for every other house in the neighborhood, but we have to make some sort of adjustment for the fact that this project is contemplating over 1,000 square feet of non-habitable space when most other houses have in the neighborhood of 400 or 500. And I think that's an issue that I brought up on some of the One Carter projects when they had, you know, the 2-car garage and then the workspace and whatever. And so we have to, as best we can, compare apples to apples.
Although in defense of the project, I'd like to say that if a person wants to, you know, have less living space but would enjoy a really big shop,
No, I'm not telling them how to use their square footage. It's just under our code, we count all of that as floor area.
I got it.
And the county doesn't. And so it's sort of sometimes we're speaking in different words, and
And
we
we
need
use
to
the
try to
county's-
compare.
We use the county's numbers for in the listing, the comparisons. So it's, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we don't
Right.
get too prejudiced based on
No.
that, okay?
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, then if the applicant or the applicant's representative would like to address the commission, please come forward.
Good evening. Michael Reinhardt. Before I start, I'd like to thank Claire for her patience and guidance to get me to this point in the process. She's been very, very helpful. That's it.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Did you want to
Last
explore
block?
the block?
Yeah. Do you know what the type of?
Well, they're somewhat obscured. They don't have a pattern. And they're from Illinois. They're not from Spain or
Right.
Mexico. They're somewhat obscure. They distort the picture, but like I said, there's no pattern, there's no grid on it. But because the glass blocks are solely in the showers, you can't disconcern anything on the other side except a form.
Okay, got it. And I think that is a good choice, putting them in the shower areas.
I grew up in I don't want to get too personal, but the windows in the showers, the glass blocks in the showers, my grandmother's house had that, and I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house. It's just a little comfort thing.
I have a question. You're using a style that creates a wall that is thicker than standard. What's inside the wall?
The wall, I talked to Hong, and we talked about doing it a couple ways, but the bottom line is the king studs on either side of the door or the windows are going to be full width 2x10s. In the field where there's nothing that would reveal the lack of thickness, there's going to be a 2x4 on the inside, a 2x4 on the outside, with a piece of 3/4 inch plywood
in
about
between.
4 feet to marry them together so that they don't wrap and distort. They'll be small enough to where it won't impede where the insulation goes, or the plumbing, or the electrical, but it'll stabilize the interior and exterior walls.
So what level of insulation? You have an opportunity to provide extra insulation. What's your plan?
Probably R30, which is pretty massive for walls, actually. But insulation's cheap.
Okay.
Comparatively.
So, did the arborist see the low-impact development plan?
Did not. But having said that, when we put in the pool equipment, and I pulled a permit and did all that work, we had to run a gas line around the house and up the side to get to the heater. And when we did that, I had an arborist there, and there was nothing. I mean, there was a couple of very small roots, but we didn't have to chop anything running that course. And the other issue is when that front wall in the front yard is something I put in on the previous permit, and there's 3 to 4 feet of dirt on top of the existing lawn that was there that I backfilled from the front. So I'm not saying it's impossible to get to the roots, but the roots are at least 3 to 4, well, they're deeper than the surface that is visible for sure. Oak trees like,
Deeper than they used to be.
yes. Well, that they usually are, because I covered it with more dirt when I backfilled the front yard and leveled it.
And the arborist saw it after that happened.
Excuse me?
The arborist,
Different arborist.
the arborist looked at it after that soil had been put on top of the roots.
Oh, yes, that soil's been there for 4 or 5 years.
And then this shop, is that going to have water and gas and electricity, and is it going to be?
It's going to have electricity for sure. No gas, no water. It's just the.
And it's going to be open to that single stall of the 3-star garage, so that's
Correct.
going to be one big space now.
It's going to be an L-shaped space, basically, so I can, yes.
When you added that soil, did that raise the level of the soil at the
No.
trunk of the tree?
No, because the trunk's on my neighbor's property. So I can't, I didn't do anything close to the trunk because, like I said, it's not even on my property. So
About how far away is the trunk from where
I'd
you were
say-
adding the soil?
I'd say 12 feet from where the last of the soil was added. And it's been like 5 years. And the arborist said the tree's in fine shape, so, except for some trimming issues that has nothing to do with the ground.
There's nothing magical about the location of those infiltration catchment basins, right? I mean, if the arborist looked at it and said, "Oh, you need to move this 5 feet," it seems like you got plenty of room that you could just move that.
Absolutely. That is the third permutation of that LID report because of various reasons. And it was supposed to be one big basin. You know, we actually had an on-site with Kevin, the consulting civil engineer for the city, and we met my engineer there, and he walked her through it, and then she came up with a totally different plan. And when she submitted it to me, I said, "Whoa, this isn't what we talked about." And so she went back and did it again. And then she started going around me and just talking straight to Kevin, which bothered Kevin quite a bit, and me also. And because it was always supposed to be one sector. And she decided that she wanted to protect all the, my underground plumbing and utilities and stuff. And so she made it 2 sectors. The bottom line is the LID needs work still. It's incomplete or not. I'm not happy with it as it is. So I wouldn't object to moving that one basin over or putting everything on the other side. The bottom line is when I did my backyard project before, all the drainage runs through the south side. Water just flowed straight to the house. So we were gonna actually build a 2-story house. But when I built the pool deck, we brought it out enough thinking that we were going to go up. Well, that was in 2010 when we drew up those plans, and in that decade, a lot's changed. So we basically didn't even consider bringing a 2-story before you. And but the bottom line is because I was going to put a 2-story there. If you saw the site plan, I mean, there's places where the house is 4 feet from the pool deck. There's another place where the house is 10 feet from the pool deck, but has a organic growth area to keep the sun from radiating off the deck and into the house or off the pool. It's a solar thing that I was advised on. It's just if I put the house right up on the deck, it would have been so hot from the reflection of the pool and the brick deck. So that's why it moved back. So that's why we moved to the side yard. But what I'm asking to infringe on the side yard setback is 90 square feet. At section 36 foot long by 2.5, which is like 3% of my total required side yard setback.
So it's an area thing, basically. You needed that area
Well,
for your floor plan.
To abide by the Title 24 stuff and make the construction affordable, I needed to hold the house back from the pool deck because the one place where the master bedroom is like 4 feet from the deck, I'm going to have a double wall to keep the inside of the house from solar radiation from the afternoon sun. So, yes, because we were going to put the house higher and then we ended up putting it further back, but we couldn't go back because of the solar issue. We went that way 2 feet, 2.5 feet.
And you're saying that for the 90 square feet that the overall plan couldn't be adjusted to
Anything's
absorb that?
adjustable. I mean, anything's possible. I'm not denying that. What I'm asking, given the fact that my neighbor's side yards are equal to or much less than my yard, and I'm asking for 90 square feet, the floor plan is more of a ratio kind of thing. If you look at the house, it's got 5-foot wide hallways because that's what Spanish houses look like in the interior. And I just carried that through to the rest of the house as far as how the ratio of the width of the hallway worked with the rooms and things like that. I mean.
But did you develop these floor plans yourself?
Yes, I did. I've been pondering this house for about 15 years.
What, the dormer on the back side of the house is for what?
Because I've got that centrally located laundry room without any exterior exposure. There's no air, there's no light, there's nothing.
Okay.
And it was to bring light and air into the laundry room.
Okay.
If we can go back to the 90 feet for a minute, I have a question for council, and that is, in considering that particular issue, can we apply the same type of considerations, the same standards that would be used in a pure variance? In other words, they're extenuating conditions about the property, the physical property. Is it fair for us to look at it that way?
You want to treat it like a variance is your question?
Yeah.
No, we don't do it. We don't do it. We have a specific finding in the design review that allows some amount of relief from development standards based on identifiable architectural style, and that's finding 7. So it's really based on that finding, not on a variance, because it would be very, very difficult to make a variance finding for that. But we don't. We particularly added in a little bit of flexibility so that we could accommodate that if we feel that. Well, let's see what it says.
And the amount that we're talking about is within that.
Yeah, it says we're allowed to accommodate characteristics of identifiable architectural style. Proposed project adheres to the norms of such identifiable architectural style, and that such style is consistently carried on throughout all elevations of the building, regardless of whether they are the same, or publicly visible. Ugh.
Mine says regardless, but
Yeah, okay, that's even better.
That
Because you read it properly, that's why.
Well, that would then say that there's something that will be lost about the overall design or the overall style if you stick with the
Right, and
30%.
I don't think we've seen this before on a setback, but we've mostly seen it on height, because you can go up to 30 feet on this if you have the sort of, Swiss chalet style.
Yeah, if you've got some stylistic element like that, but
excuse me.
Questionable whether the width, the overall width of the house is that same sort of consideration here.
And just Commissioner Catalano, just to clarify, I don't think you would be able to treat it like a variance, because that would require adding additional factors that aren't in the ordinance itself. The design review permit has specific elements that need to be met, specific findings that need to be met. So you couldn't add additional findings. You'd have to limit yourself to making the findings that are required by code.
I think this was just explained to me in a way that comes down to something similar.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I got you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll open up the public hearing to anybody other than the applicant who would like to speak on the project. And I do note before anybody comes up that we had a number of, let's see how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 emails from neighbors, all is supportive. But please do come up if you'd like to speak.
Hi, I'm Ray Smith. I live at 233 East Orange Grove. It's on the corner of Oak Meadow and Orange Grove. And I've looked over his plans and talked to them, and I really like them. I think they're nice. One of my neighbors that redid their house, and the roof line's pretty high, and it's okay, but I like his roof lines down, keeps it from interfering with the neighbor's views and everything. And you were mentioning something about the oak tree in the corner of the house. It looked like to me on the plans, that corner was never going to be any farther out, I don't believe. Looked like it was on top of the existing structure. I don't know, I may be wrong, but.
No, I think the question is just about irrigation
Yeah.
and
root
water
damage.
infiltration. It's not the way the house is
I'm
built.
very much in favor of it, and it looks like it's well done, and I think it'd be an enhancement of our neighborhood.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Chris Paulson, or Christian Paulson. I live at 161 Oak Meadow Road. I've known Mike and Yubi for many, many years, ever since they moved in, and I'm very much in favor of letting them, as neighbors, do what they propose to do to their residents. And we're sitting on pretty good sized lots there, and for him to add a few more square feet, it's totally okay with me. And we can make sure that the quality of construction is going to be okay too. I've looked at his pool, and some of you might have looked at it too, and nothing but quality there. So I would not be, I'm totally in favor of it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Jack Owen. I live at 174 Oak Meadow Road, across the street and up one door. So I'm always looking over across at Mike's and Yubi's house there. Yeah, the design is very nice. I like the roof line, keeps it proportional, down low. It'd be something to get up in the morning or evening and be able to look at and have a nice view of. The little bit of, Chris said, the little bit of extension of the house to maintain the floor plan, the widths and the architectural style of that house. You wouldn't want to cut those down by cutting into that and shoving it back in. It would change the layout of the house. So I think with what he has, it's not going to interfere with his driveway going down the side or any of the other visual aspects of the house. If anything, it's more of an enhancement to it. So being so close and directly impacted by it, I'm in support of the project. And so the way he's done his pool and everything else in the back, everything continues on through just like that. I think we'll have a nice project on the street and enhance the neighborhood, along with Sierra Madre as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ellen Day, 190 South Mountain Trail, kind of catty corner in back of the property, within the 300 feet, I guess. I'm speaking for my parents, Donna and Robert Day, who are unable to be here. Concerns that I have, I'm not specifically against it, but I do want to get a few things clear in my mind, so I'm not concerned about it now, and also for anybody that might use this as a precedence to do things to their property, and then they'll say, well, this person did this, you can do it too, and then the whole neighborhood becomes different. I noticed when you Google Earth the property, a lot of properties have trees and grass and ground cover, and I'm not so sure that this one is going to kind of go by the flavor of the neighborhood in that way, if you look at it and see how much structure and concrete is in the yard. So I'd like to kind of go through a couple of these. I'm a neophyte at this, so please bear with me. I went through a couple of the things under single-family residence, the chapters and the sections, so I'd like to address that a little bit and get feedback or reassurance from you. In the past, at least back to 2010, and I'm not sure of the exact date, but there's been a lot of noise coming back there in that direction. Noise like steel, sharp noises, steel. It almost sounds like steel cutting and drilling and things like that. And it's been over a number of years. I don't know if it's been exactly from that property. I think so. I don't think I could hear it as from the property across when it was built. So my main thing is the noise level that could happen from the shop. And also, so I'm going to go through here. When I looked at the plan briefly, I saw that it looked like a dotted line and no wall between the single car garage and the shop. And I was wondering if that meets within the 600 feet or less square feet that's allowed for the workshop, or does that include the single car garage also?
The shop is connected to that single.
Yeah, and it looks like in the plan, and I don't know for sure, but it looks like maybe they're open up to each other, that there's no permanent wall. Is that the case?
That's the case.
Yes,
yeah.
that is the case.
So
The single car garage and the shop become one room.
So since there's no wall, how many square feet does the single car garage and the shop take up? Is it within the allowable 600 square feet?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
It's 297 plus 282.
Okay, all right. The reason I bring that up is because when one builds a shop, and I'm not saying him specifically, but the concern of a neighbor would be that it would become like a commercial thing. Somebody would have like a business back there where there would be a lot of noise in the future, and I want to make sure that that does not happen. If he's going to be in there a lot and not have a business where other people come or where he's working every day, I would hope that the insulation in the shop would be very good so the neighbors can't hear it. Also, I'm concerned that the in 17.20.120, it mentions that the permissible lot coverage by dwellings, footprint, building, workshops, garage, that kind of thing, is no more than 40%. I'm wondering if it meets that requirement. What percentage does it take up of the lot?
It was in the slide.
That was in the
presentation.
slide on the staff report.
It's
I didn't see that.
Claire probably has that.
Okay. 22.9?
Yeah,
Okay,
23.
that's good. When I look at it from an aesthetic viewpoint, and I see like a pool, a lot of concrete, building, it looks like all of that stuff takes up more space than the average house does in that area, with no kind of like natural space, green space, or ground in the yard. It seems to be mostly taken up with concrete, buildings, etc. My concern is, I'm not right next door to it, so that's okay with me. But in the future, for places being built around where I am, I would not appreciate it if somebody would interfere with the character of the neighborhood by having so much space taken up by concrete and structure. So that's just my comment, and I wanted to make sure that everybody thought of that, and also thought of it going forward for how it might affect other people that want to take up that much of their lot with something other than ground and open space. Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. You really studied some of those things. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Would the applicant like to address some of those issues of, especially the noise, insulation, and whatnot?
Okay. The noise that she hears from my property.
Thank you.
The house that her parents live in is 5 houses away from me. It's at the very...
No, it's not. That's incorrect.
Sorry, if you look at the map, you're at...
It's not 5 houses.
According to this one, it is. But the bottom line is, the backyard, my backyard, is surrounded in that corner of the house by 9-foot walls. They're 3-foot retaining with a 6-foot pool wall. The shop is below the top of the wall. It's firmly ensconced it's below ground level basically from all the surrounding houses. Those walls are not going to let any noise get out, and I don't know how to comment on the grinding metallic sounds. I haven't been doing anything at my house. I've been working. So, I mean, there's been some construction in the neighborhood. Maybe that's what you heard, but as far as, I'm pretty certain that those walls that are solid grouted concrete block walls, 9 feet tall, 6 feet on the exterior, do a pretty good job of muffling any sound that comes out of my yard. And
So no sound goes over those walls?
well, the walls, like I said, are 9 feet tall. The shop is
The shop is 9 feet below?
of the top of the walls. Yeah, the floor of the shop is 9 feet below the top of the walls. They're 3 feet retaining plus 6 feet on top of that because I have a pool yard. And so I'm not, but there's been no work at my house or anything. I mean, there was construction there that got signed off in 2014 when we did the pool. And that's my only comment I have on the sound.
Is it not enclosed right now?
Excuse me?
The current shop, if whatever's going on right now is not enclosed, and this.
There's nothing going on there.
Well,
May I ask what
Whatever.
kind of stuff you do in your shop? I mean, are you a woodworker or what?
The shop actually, I currently have 6 cars in a 3-car garage. I'm going to get rid of 2 of those cars, but the bottom line is that shop is going to be basically a deep garage mostly, and then I do things like change oil, rotate tires, stuff like that. But I don't weld. I don't have that talent to weld. Once the house is built, there's going to be no more woodwork done on the property because I'm going to hang that up. So, no, it's just, bottom line is my wife's pretty tired of my tools on the kitchen table and stuff like that. And it's just a route to appease both of us, give me a little room to spread out and do my projects and stuff. I have a car that we used to drive when I was dating that I'm going to fix up, but it's not going to make any noise. It's wrenches and things like that, so.
Yeah, so is the gray Porsche in the rendering yours?
Yes.
Just check. I have one too. That's why I asked.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
May I make a comment about this?
Quickly.
Okay. We spoke, we had a nice
Oh,
conversation.
if you're going to make a comment, you're going to have to come down though, so we can get on the record.
And I always like when people be completely honest and not duplicitous. He mentioned that he does work for TV shows, like set construction for TV shows. So my comment about the workshop is if somebody is not being completely on the up and up with the workshop elongated into the garage, that it not be used for that kind of commercial purpose, because that would create a lot of noise and things like that. And I didn't hear him mention about insulation of the shop. So that is one item he left out when you asked what he does.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, last time. Let's be done.
Yes, I build movie sets. I'm in the union. Construction happens on sound stages on the lots. I wouldn't even be allowed to bring something from off the lot. Everything moves by Teamsters. I do have a job, but my job is at the studios, not at my house. I build very large things, and it just wouldn't be functional trying to build in my yard.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll bring it back to the commission. Who would like to start us off?
I'll jump.
Go ahead, Bob.
So, this is a very interesting project. I enjoyed going to the property and talking with the applicant. Addressing the concerns that were raised. Noise from the shop is a code enforcement issue, and as a citizen, you are free to call into the city and have them respond. When there is construction on the property, there will be an agreement that construction can only take place between certain hours, and they're not to, go beyond that. I notice there is construction in some of the homes to the north of the applicant's property, so the neighborhood is not a dormant neighborhood. There seems to be things going on there. So whether the noise that you hear is coming from this property or from the adjacent properties, I don't know.
Over the last 10 years.
Well, we can't, we're the planning commission, we only can deal with what's in front of us today. There is some green space around this. I was actually I've been on a lot of properties in the city of Sierra Madre in the last 30, 40 years, and this one has by far, the most massive, right there and not hear it, but, and how the wall got there, I don't want to, I'm not going to go to that, but I think the wall will act as a pretty good screen for a lot of things, both visually and for sound. But there is green space at the back. There's a whole section behind the garage and shop and all the way, that's from corner to corner, and this green space around the front. And even where the property is on the north side where the intrusion is. So there's green space around this. This is not a desert, landscape. This is kind of an interesting thing because the project includes, like you said, almost 1,000 square feet of non-inhabitable space. And we have triggers for how big we want things, and one of the reasons why it's in front of us is because the project is of a certain size, and we want to reduce bulk and massing, and size is an element of that. With 1,000 feet taken out of the project, this doesn't present itself as being a huge building. From the street, it is not dissimilar from the other houses on the street. It has a low profile. It's going to be lower than some of the other houses that are to the south of it, including, I think, Ray's house. So it's a low profile plan. It has a unique design. The design is not like a lot of other houses we've seen. This is now in terms of aesthetics. It's one of our elements of finding. We like to think that we're a community of eclectic tastes, and this certainly is one of the few like that. Mostly in Sierra Madre, we see the thick walls. It's a true adobe style. There are buildings in town that are actually made of adobe that that have these thicker walls. I was glad to hear that the applicant is going to use the thicker walls as an opportunity to provide more insulation, because it'll create less needs for energy to cool the place. I was impressed with the low impact plan. I liked knowing that is part of our, and seeing how that is calculated, and it's part of our process. And I was encouraged. So I think I can make most of the findings on this.
I think that the arborist needs to look at the low impact, these, whatever they're called, infiltration trenches, to make sure that this amount of water isn't going to affect those oak trees, both oak trees in the front yard. Because it seems like those are going to be pretty good size containers of place to let the water soak in, which is fantastic. But you want to make sure that they aren't too close to the roots of those trees, and that the water seeping into the ground out of these basins isn't going to somehow affect those oak trees. I think it's really important to have the arborist approve those plans in this particular case. I think the rear of this house is a lot more interesting looking than the front of it.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the front of this house is boring. I think the rear of the house is quite interesting looking, actually, and I really like that aspect of it. I don't really see something in the. I don't think I can make the findings that we have to go into the setback. I don't see something extraordinary about it. Maybe that's just me, and I like to hear what other people say, what everyone else says about it. But I don't think there's anything about this design that requires that to happen, except to add more square feet to the house. I think that I had some concerns about this, what exactly the changes of this workshop on the garage were. I look at it and think that could be a second unit, which I think is a positive thing in Sierra Madre. But that's something that could happen too at some time in the future, because there are, I'm not saying you're doing it, but there are 2 cars and there's this extra space, and that could be made into a second unit by someone someday. And I was just curious if that was part of it. I guess that's basically all I have to say about it.
Joe, you want to give us your thoughts?
Yes. First of all, it's a really good project. I'd like to agree with agree with a number of the things that you said, Bob, about it. It's generally really well thought out. It's like very, very calmly fitting into its neighborhood, and yet at the same time, you can see from the photographs that there are houses coming due for some housing stock renewal in that area, and so this is an important thing to be doing. Generally, it's a common, it's a really good project, and I support what you're saying, Gina, about the relationship of the oak tree to those other elements, and I'd like to see that as a condition that the arborist and the engineer get together on that one. A couple of other things here. Talking about, it's not our issue whether the shop eventually becomes a second unit or not, but you notice the way that pushes out to the south and just under the oak tree, and it's all so that there can be an outside door. As opposed to just going through the shop, where you could still have an outside door if you if you slid that whole thing north just a little bit. It would be very easy to say bring it flush with the existing wall of the garage, even put a door in facing that south wall, and just move the thing away from the oak tree. There's really no reason I can see why the oak tree should be infringed on at all. So I would like to see that get done for sure. I'd like to comment. Somebody in the audience had said something about, if I recall correctly, about the planting. It doesn't look like the rest of the neighborhood. I'd like to commend that. I think that in a neighborhood full of lawns, that we need all of the sustainable planting and good examples of sustainable planting that we have. So all I can say is if it is a neighborhood full of lawns, like I think it is, and somebody is stepping out and they're doing sustainable planting, instead I say go to it and let's see some more of that too. It's something I think that's got to happen. So kudos for that. The last thing is I don't know how everybody else feels. I'm really torn about that, the issue of that 27 to that 30%, and I don't know whether that's a deal breaker or it's not. I generally like to think that unless there's a really good reason that everybody respects the setbacks, like it's a DMZ for the people on both sides of the line. All right, and that way one person has a reason, another person has a reason, and pretty soon you have a complete failing of what the intention of the code was. So I don't know how you all feel about that, but I have some concern about that extra.
Well, on that side, the neighbor has a driveway also on that north side, and on a slight parking area. Whereas on the south side, it seems to be a lot closer to the neighbor. So of any place for them to infringe on the setback, the north side, and I guess it's pretty small. I mean, he still has a whole driveway in between. So it's not as if he were up against the property line.
Yeah, you're saying the fact the driveway is there makes it unencroachable. I mean, further.
Well, I mean, if there's going to be any encroachment in the setback, this seems to be the area where it's going to be the least obvious, because there's all the driveway. The applicant said he wasn't going to put continue the wall there, and on the other side, on the neighbor to the north side, that's also a parking area. So you have the vision of there's a lot of space.
Yeah, my gut is it's a great project. Let them do that, and on the other hand, I don't know what it sets up in terms of not having solid good reasons for.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'd like to hear how everybody else thinks about that. I'm really in the middle about it.
I mean, some of my thoughts on this, I concur with Gina's comment. I think from a design standpoint, I appreciate that it's a single-story structure rather than something that was 2 stories, because this style, although carried out very well on all the cardinal elevations, I think it would lend itself to something very boxy, as it moved up. So I can appreciate that, and I do agree. I think the rear is way more interesting than the front, and it almost like, and this may be a tomato thing, but I feel like if that was the front, it would be so much visually more interesting. So that's one thing. On the setback, that was the only other issue that kind of, like, I'm having some heartburn with it, only because, for a couple reasons. One, I think this lot can warrant that encroachment, the width and sort of the layout of the neighbor's driveway and all that. But it also would be very easy to comply. And so when I always look to those sort of lines in the sand, they were developed for a reason, and when it's more the precedence of, okay, well, this is only 2.5 feet, and that's fine, and I think the lot can accommodate it. But down the road, the next project may say, well, we just need 3.5 feet, it's 26%, what's the big deal, and so then I kind of go to, like, are you between a rock and a hard place where, for instance, you couldn't get the kitchen in with adequate layout, or the bedroom gets hammered or something because you have to stay within these lines, and had you given them an extra foot, it would work better, the plan, and so that's kind of what was my question on the plan development. I think when you look at it, this may be a criticism of it, and I know you've spent years developing it, and that's great, but there's like a ton of hallway. Like there's a racetrack right in the middle, and if those hallways are 5.5 feet, whatever, I think you're hard pressed to make the case that that's indigenous to that style. Like, I think a 4-foot hallway would be perfectly adequate and wide and give you ample room to take carts down it or whatever you needed to do. And so it seems like there's, and the house is over like that square footage threshold. So for me, like, it may sound like we're nitpicking this, but you went over, right? And that's how you want it, and that's fine. But then I don't see like a hardship or between a rock and a hard place to comply with that 2.5 feet. And it takes me back to a project we reviewed a while ago where we fought tooth and nail for a 30-inch or 3 feet or whatever it was for a garage,
Right.
you know. And I know there was extenuating circumstances associated with that, but like we drew the line because it wasn't a big deal. That it was still set far enough back from the street, but it was that whole issue of like they could have complied, and it wasn't like there was a hardship and this was the only place it could go. Kind
Right,
of thing.
and I think one other thing about that project is once they redesigned to comply, they actually ended up liking the project.
It was a better
more,
project, yeah.
It was better.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like taking a fresh eye, like it's easy to break the rules because that's how you want it, but sometimes like those rules sometimes give you a better product, like, you know, and I don't know, this is where like my trained eye comes into it. Like I see several ways to get out that 2 feet or whatever it is and still have the same house. So, but at that time, I'm kind of torn because it's not like a huge deal. Like if you go off of Finding 7, I think they've carried the design, detailing, and the style on all the major elevations. Like it's cohesive. So if that warrants them having this encroaching this or breaking this development standard, then fine. To me, that was more pertaining to sort of height and sort of.
Right, but I mean,
pushing out,
I think the question is that extra encroachment necessary to accommodate the characteristics of the identical architectural
I
style?
don't think so. Yeah.
And that's
Is it required to make this house what it is, to have that encroachment? And I say no.
I mean, I still think you'd have a beautiful home. The plan would be virtually the same.
You know, there's a reason
So-
that we have this 30%, and I think we should stick to it unless there's a super good reason not to. That's kind of my.
And on the flip side, I don't think it's, you know, one of the reasons we had those extra findings was if you're going to go over that threshold, give us an exceptional project, you know, and we sort of tailored these findings to push applicants towards that was above sort of the baseline, you know. And I think this is a really nice house. I don't think it's an exceptional design and what are the other characteristics of it, you know. So like it's a nice house and I think it complies in every other manner, but I don't think it warrants getting that relief because
Well,
the plan
you
can't change.
You hit it exactly on the head before when you referred to a line in the sand. Some of you may recall that before Desert Storm, that a line in the sand was a line that you drew in the sand that the bully came and messed up, and then you had to back up and draw it again. And somebody would mess it up, and you back up and draw it again. It wasn't until Desert Storm that it took on some kind of a tough guy meaning, and that's exactly what's happening here. And really, I mean, it's kind of like every time there's a question about like this about one of our standards, it's always like just trying to question whether it's really rational or not.
I like your point because I looked at it as, okay, the design was very consistent, and they'd already they'd set the design up with the pool area, and then they created the house to match, and it was all consistent. But your point about, well, you know, there's places in the design here to alleviate the setback. Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think, you know, on the flip side of the setback thing, the reason we have these, it may seem like arbitrary and capricious that like you have a 30% setback on these larger lots, but that also goes to the character of that street and that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason we have these larger setbacks on these larger lots. I mean, they're not quite estate size, but the point being is we don't want these larger homes that you can build because your lot's bigger to get closer to, we want this kind of house that's single story kind of in the middle, you know, with a lot of relief on the side because that's the character of the street. So it's not arbitrary, like to go from 30 to like 27. It may seem like, oh, it's just a little, but it's there's a reason we set it up that way, you know, to have this cumulative setback. So anyway.
Bill?
I was sort of thinking like Bob and was looking at the overall design that Spanish-style homes, you know, when they spread out, you know, kind of, they allow themselves some of this extra, I don't want to say width, but in terms of the aesthetics. So I was okay with the setback. That wasn't a deal breaker. It sounds like you want to see if the applicant wants to maybe rethink it and see if you can come up with a design he likes even better. It didn't meet the setback, but I was okay with it. I thought it met the, you know, it is fairly thoroughly thought out, and I think it matches, you're right, the design of the pool in the back coming forward. But, so I was going to allow the setback. That's the only thing I just say. The rest of it I think is fine. He meets all the other findings.
Okay.
I don't think it makes, I don't think it makes that finding, for me anyway. Especially the front aspect of this house.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm a little bit more negative on this application than my other commissioners. I think the house is a nice house. I agree with that. I think it looks nice. Based on the detail and the comprehensiveness of the application and the applicant speaking tonight, I have no qualms or worries that it's going to be built right and issues with drainage and oak trees can be worked out. To me, it's just really a question of when you trigger that supersized threshold that goes to finding 8 and you require a superior project that exhibits exceptional design, I just don't see that. I see this as a fine house. And if it didn't trigger that finding 8, I would say, well, I have issues with finding 7 with the setback, because I don't see that that's really necessary for the architectural style. But the other part is, I think you could redesign to move that square footage, either lose the square footage or move it inside or something. But because it's so big, and it's really a lot bigger than the neighborhood, if you look at, if you start to factor in the non-habitable square footage, you're looking at a project that, even if you figure the rest of the neighborhood has 3-car garage with 600 square feet instead of 400, you're looking at a project that's more than 2 standard deviations above the mean. And all the projects we've approved have either been less than 1, or the one up on Carter with the bin was a rounding error over. And so this is really a lot bigger. And to me, if you're going to be a lot bigger, you really have to have even better design. Because I think those things are really sort of inversely proportional. If you have a small house and it's just okay, it sort of blends in a lot more. You know, for me to get behind this project, I would want to see definitely the setback issue fixed, but also the size, either the size shrunk quite a bit, or the design rethought. And I think I agree with both of your thoughts that the back rear elevation is far superior to any of the ones that are public view. I saw that elevation. I thought, oh, I would like to hang out at that pool. That looks really nice. But you know, the front elevation and the sides are sort of just boxy. And it's true that they're 1 story, so they don't impinge on the neighbor. And I don't think there's anything negative about this house. Yeah. But the flip side is I don't see it as exceptional. And I think for houses that get to finding 8, I want more. And I think that was the whole purpose of finding 8, was that we are going to put a significant burden on large houses.
If you want to go over, yeah.
Right. And so, you know, that's where I am. And I'm not going to tell you how many square feet or what exactly, but I think that I need more. And, you know, if the whole thing was shrunk under 3,500 square feet, you wouldn't even need any discretionary review at all, because you don't have a second story. So I mean, that's one option. Or another option would be to continue and shrink somewhat, redesign somewhat. On the other hand, the other thing maybe for the applicant is to fix the setback. It sounds like there's some people that gives some heartburn, and you probably could get a majority without doing very much shrinkage or redesign other than that. And I'll just vote against it, and you'll have a fine house.
Well, I mean,
but you know, it's
not to interrupt, but I feel like you know, the more you're explaining that, part of my heartburn was obviously the setback, but it's a fine house, and but it's like vanilla, like it's not. And if our finding, the whole point of that setup was, if you choose to go over that threshold, we get, like you just said, should be a superior project, you know, in every way. And it doesn't get me going like some of the other projects we've seen where we're like, okay, that's like it's a very site specific, well designed, like, and unique in every way. Like, anyway, I actually would probably be in your camp, like, as far as that goes, because I feel like that then we're letting this project cross that threshold, which is fine, but then missing the mark on the findings. So it's like,
and just to clarify, I have no heartburn at all about the fact that you have a lot of non-habitable square footage. I don't care how you use your square footage. I mean, for the aesthetic, obviously you can't use it illegally or in bad ways. I do think the noise issues are imminently addressable. I'm sure if you put in appropriate insulation and you've got those walls, I don't think you're going to have a noise issue. If you want to convert it to a second unit, knock yourself out. That's entirely legal. That wouldn't give me any heartburn at all. It's really, to me, it's an issue of the overall size and the aesthetics of the design. And I think that those, you know, go together. And I'm not saying it's not possible to have an exceptional design with this size. I think it would be easier if there were less. I think if you, you know, took on especially the front elevation and put some negative space in there so you'd have more articulation, you could probably see a much more interesting presentation to the street.
If this house were flipped and the back were facing the front, it would be about 60% better, because it has that articulation, it has shape, it has variation in the form, and the back is a cool looking. It's a nice design. But the front of this house, even though the argument is it espouses a certain kind of architecture which maybe looks like that, it's not an exceptional. Front of this house is.
I think that if the owner goes in that direction, that he'd be well advised to really look carefully at what made the back elevation so much more successful, and just try to reuse some of those design strategies on the front, not just take the front and start putting decorative detail or gewgaws on it and see if he can get over that way. There's some stuff about the back elevation that's just in the basic cooking that I think ought to be informing the front elevation a lot better.
I mean, it's their, if they want it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I just say if that's the path they choose, I think we can easily kind of tell them what's successful, you know.
Just, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but in defense of size, some of those surrounding circles where we get all these comparisons of size, these lots are really big. And some of these houses, again, haven't been redeveloped. So you saw a lot of 1,900 square foot, 1,800 square foot homes. That's nice, but I can tell you, I mean, in the future, somebody's going to turn those into bigger homes, and they deserve, with that kind of lots coverage, to deservedly have that much square footage. We're trying to build or allow certain types of house up on Baldwin that are equally that big. They don't have the room for the other non-habitable space, but I just want to put that in perspective in terms of what kind of message we're setting to the applicant.
Right.
Overall
I think that I agree with what you're saying. I think that there's obviously, if this were on a small lot in the middle of the town, it would just not make any sense at all. But I think the flip side is, we have to apply. Let me start over. We don't go by is it a good house or not? Just thumbs up or thumbs down. We have to apply the actual findings that we have. And I think if you look at the ones on Baldwin, the one Carter ones that we're looking at, we don't have finding 8 there, to my chagrin. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't have approved that house that we almost approved, except for a couple of minor changes, if there were finding 8. I would say, this one's not up to snuff. And this is similar on this house. If we didn't have finding 8 here, I would say, well, let's work with that setback issue. But we do. And, you know, when we updated this code, we have long discussions about what's the point of how we want to treat large homes and how we want to review them. And so I really worry about backsliding into I like this house or I don't like this house.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I was looking at this, I was thinking about that finding in relation to the setback, but not so much in relation to the size. And I think that we have to remember that it applies to both of those issues, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To the over 3,500 square foot size house.
Well, it sounds like we are somewhat mixed. Applicant, would you like to? I think we could. I think if we tried to get to a vote tonight, I don't think you'd probably care for the result. But
Let me start.
Yep.
I'm a little, well, I'll just bite that one. My wife and I traveled all through California. We measured Spanish missions. We measured wall depths. We measured the size of the rectangle. The reason the front of the house is based the way it is because adobe houses are rectangles. That's how they built them. There was no structure in them. They had lintels over the windows. They had gable roofs. Because I'm trying to sell an authentic adobe house, that's why there's no gigos on the front of the house. They didn't have glass blocks. They didn't have turquoise, well, they did have turquoise windows. But all of those architectural details are in the back of the house to sell the front of the house to look like an authentic adobe house. I start hanging that stuff on the front of the house, it doesn't play right. So I love my pool. We're going to entertain there. That's why all that stuff's there. But I mean, there's a shower up front in the front wall. And I specifically didn't put glass blocks in that shower and only that shower because I didn't want to break up the adobe look. And the concentric windows. There's 2 concentric windows and 2 more concentric windows framing the front door. Very common architectural detail. You're not going to find an adobe house that's not a rectangle shape. So, you know, it's authentic adobe house visually. And so that's why it doesn't have the gewgaws on the front of it. And because I respect the community, I put the gewgaws on the back because it wouldn't upset anybody by seeing all that stuff because it didn't play with an adobe house. And that's why it's got a gable roof, and that's why it's got a veranda, because those are all architectural details that are just straight from an authentic adobe house.
But do you understand, like, what, see, this is exactly the point. It's not the additive elements, like sticking it onto the house. It's what we were talking about. The front looks very flat and plain, and I get that it's a rectangle and you want to stick to that visually for your Adobe Hacienda Mission Spanish house. But what we're saying is it would be nice if there was some articulation, some push and pull in that elevation. Everything's additive on that front. On the back, your veranda or your porch is recessed into that facade, that elevation, correct? Yes. And the bedroom pushes out, right? So you have some visual interest along that. It's still a rectangle, but you have visual interest along that whole elevation where parts of the home are coming out, breaking up that roof line. Right now you have a straight front sort of gabled roof that's coming down, and then you've got the porch or the veranda or whatever you're calling it out, sticking out in front of it. It's not about the stuff you add. It's not the glass block and stuff. That's not what we're talking about.
I'm sitting right on the prevailing setback. I can't go forward anymore. I can't go back anymore because the swimming pool's there. So to put recesses and to break up the front slab face of the wall is...
It might make the house a little smaller.
Well, I think also you can invade the front setback with a patio, right?
I am. I'm already doing that by 6 feet. I'm taking advantage of that.
Okay.
So and then another point is, it's like my house is literally 2/3 the size of the house 2 doors away from me. That house, the habitable space of that house has got more space than all my floor space at all. It'll be the 4th largest house on the 14-house cul-de-sac. So, I mean, the notion that it's a big house when I've got, I mean, and I know that the code has changed and it's been revised and stuff, but one of the things that I've heard in many of your meetings is that to respect the scale of the neighborhood. And I mean, I originally was going to build a 2-story house. I respected the scale of the neighborhood. I've done everything I thought I could to appease you folks. You know, I don't know what to say. You know,
Can I ask a couple questions?
You certainly can.
You've been thinking about this a long time, and you have a strong emotional attachment to the design you submitted to us. And when you and I spoke at your property, you talked about how you use a designer for the plans.
To draw the plans.
Draw the plans.
But the input was from me.
Yeah. So, I'm not an architect, but for some reason I'm very impressed with their skills. And they see things and have a vocabulary that is greater than, you know, the one that I have. And they understand and can articulate conditions that I don't see. They have a more aesthetic eye. Would you be willing to consult with an architect and maybe perhaps in the process lose just enough on the north side of your house to be in compliance with the setback, and also see what kinds of changes are possible for the front of the house?
I'm open to many things. The fact that, I mean, once you bring an architecture in, the price of the project goes up massively. It would probably sink the end of my project right there. Because as it is, I mean, my windows go up 8% in 10 days.
Why does it go up if you bring an architect on board?
Because they need to get paid.
Do you mean the cost of the architect?
Yes.
Sinks the entire project. You're building a 3,500 square foot home, over 3,500 square foot home. So you're saying the cost of the architect?
The architects that I have talked to, I've talked to a couple before I started the project, and their fee schedule was, to me, mind-boggling. I mean, and I take it you're an architect?
That's my day job, yeah.
Yeah, I am too.
Well, and
we're only talking about some tweaking help here. But let me say a couple of things, okay? I'm not only a licensed architect. I'm also a historic restoration architect, and one of my specialties is I'm sort of recognized as an expert in real adobe building. Okay, so you came to the right place here, all right? I mean, I do know how to reconstruct real historic adobe, okay, not just frame stuff that looks like adobe. There are things that you can do to the front of this house that I think will make it more authentic and will bring a lot more articulation into it without violating what you were saying about the fact that an adobe is basically a rectangle. I get it, and you're correct about that. And I would not want to see you start to complicate it, you know, in plan an awful lot. But for instance, I'm just going to give you one for instance right now, okay? You've got those skinny little posts holding up the overhang, the porch overhang there, you know, the only time in Adobe that you see skinny little 8-inch by 8-inch is in settlement adobes. Adobes later on will tend to have stone and adobe, large columns, often with color, and the beam across the top is very, very pronounced and visible. There are things that can be done to this that would be picking up on how real good adobes, slightly higher-end adobes were made that I think would really enhance the front of this house without violating the principles that you're talking about. And I'd be happy personally to work with staff and you a little bit, bring some examples that you could consider.
That would be fine.
That would be to your liking. I don't think that we have to be really talking here just about, we can, picking up on what your desires are, I see the opening for being able to talk about some ways that that real adobe principles and building concepts could get to what everybody's talking about here.
I'd just like to point out finding 6 and 7.
And I won't charge you a fee for it either.
Finding 6, which says
You're on tape.
the proposed project exhibits coherent project-wide design and such structure or portion on the site is compatible with other portions of the project. So everything is compatible. But number 7 also says that the proposed project adheres to the norms of such identifiable architectural style, and such style is consistently carried out through all elevations of the building, regardless of whether the same are publicly visible. So that the front of this house may adhere very closely to, what a traditional adobe might be. The back clearly doesn't, if it's sort of a boxy thing. And I think.
But you like the back.
Yes, I do like the back, but you're saying the front has to be like this because it's this style, but the back
It's not.
is not that style.
I'm trying to
If you
sell
look at
that.
If you look at finding 6,
This should all be consistent.
it should be consistent. And I just think you should look at that finding.
Let me tell you something about adobes. Historically, they grew.
Yeah.
They accreted. It was box after box, an opening put into it. It's dirt. It's very plastic. There are sheds hanging off of the back. Sometimes a flood will wipe out this one and this box, and they'll just keep going. They're not always just a pure rectangle. And sometimes I'm working on a couple up in Santa Barbara County right now, where there's actually over time there's some very heavy adobe walls, and there are some wooden additions onto it too. The fact that an adobe grew over time is part of the historic characteristics, and we might be able to play on.
Yeah, I agree.
Play on that.
I have family in New Mexico. I've dealt with adobes, and they often are a lot funkier in the back. And I think that idiosyncrasy is actually consistent to the architectural style. So it's
Thank you. Yes.
no, I mean, I think
Okay, well, that was a succinct way of putting it.
If you build, a mid-century modern house, you don't stick weird stuff on the back. It's sort of that clean line thing. But adobe, that's sort of in the nature of it that you would add that stuff on the back. So I don't. That doesn't give me heartburn.
So if I chop the setback, if I remove the setback issue, what else do we need to do to proceed?
Well, what I've heard is we want to just double check the issue with the oak tree and the infiltration, and that doesn't sound like it's going to heartbreak, but that's a procedural hoop you want to jump through and make sure everyone's good there. I think that the setback seems to be sticking in at least a number of people's craws, and that you'd probably be better off not going there. And then I think overall on the style, I think there's some of the concepts that Joe was discussing probably make a lot of sense if you could evaluate some of those and see how you could add that kind of interest, maintaining still the overall sort of shape and design you're after.
Okay.
And then you would come back.
Let me ask you a question. How high off the ground are the eaves at that front porch? Do you recall?
The bottom of the beam holding the front of the veranda is 7 feet.
Okay. Okay.
I've got an issue there because you know, tile roof is supposed to be 4 and 12, and my verandas are 3.5 and 12, just because I'm running out of room there because it's not a very high building. So I've been cheating my shed roof issue on the back. I'm really tight on head space on the walls back there. But the front, I'm sure the bottom of the beam's 7 feet, so you visually can see out to the street from the kitchen.
I was asking because just in terms of looking for examples that might be helpful to you, I was trying to get a sense of how high they are.
It's that you commented on the 8x8s out front, just because I find that a fairly healthy timber, personally. But
it is.
Okay, so
it's not the only way to do it, but
no, but because I've got already established lumber in the yard on the gates and stuff like that, and the color issue of the earth tones of the brown, as opposed to I've got no river rock stacked anywhere or anything like that. It's all Santa Barbara plaster, and brown timber, you know, and the verandas and the rafters in there, and so that was just trying to keep it consistent.
Well, one of the examples I was going to show you, although I think that it may be too high for what we're talking about here, is a tremendously long colonnade at a mission that I worked on a few years ago. And
with arches, though, correct?
Arches don't work in real adobe.
No, I understand that, but I was trying to stay away from the arches.
No, we'll stay away from.
Okay, well, this is something we can do.
But I was going to show that to you because of the colors that the monks there have painted. Okay, you know, all the exterior elements, and if you think that adobes were only you know, brown and tan,
right,
you should see this. So
well, the blue color that you've got on the windows is also a very traditional color.
It is.
Yeah.
That's right.
Basic Santa Fe patina. Like something.
Okay.
See that, may I just add one other thing? For that lower roof, where you start to get concerned about the pitch on it, you might just look at a better roofing underlayment.
Yeah,
it won't break the project.
No. You just put more of it on with less lap.
Well, we already, from a few years ago, when you know there was a double of 30-pound felts with creosote in them, we now just have 2 layers of 15-pound with no creosote, and it's very, very inferior to the traditional way of doing things. And it's amazing to me that people will put such junky underlayments on a roof where the tiles themselves would last 100 years. But the underlayment's going to burn out well before that. There are things like WR Grace, water and ice shield, and so forth that work really, really well under those circumstances.
And they're darn near the same price, and they protect the thousands and thousands of dollars underneath it much better.
That's right. Yeah, and that may be helpful to you with a rake problem that you have.
I've considered that as far as trying to make that 3.5 work.
I think we're getting deep into the weeds here.
Okay.
Let's.
No more weeds.
Would you like us to continue us to a date certain, or just leave it open? And the issue, I don't know if the staff's explaining, if we do it uncertain, you're going to have to renotice. If we do it date certain, you want to be able to be ready by then, or we could continue it again.
It pretty much depends on Joe's availability and schedule right now, if he's offering to help out.
I know that we're
what he suggests.
I'm not going to draw. I'll show you some stuff.
What you establish or what you lead me to is I need that first to proceed.
Well, let's say if based on Vincent's availability that we got together sometime early middle next week, then you project out from there.
Okay, so let's continue it.
We can continue meeting to possibly March 7th.
March 7th. Yeah, we're all booked in February in any event, right?
Might have a slot for February 21st. But, and that would be a typical normal turnaround time to give staff enough time to also prepare a revised staff report and get everything, all the products put together. So that's always a possibility. It depends on how quickly and what kind of feedback we get.
It always takes longer than you think.
Yes.
Well,
March is probably.
It depends if I'm just going to get by with visual elements on the front as opposed to moving walls and stuff. I think that's a timely thing. I've already kind of expected the issue with the side yard setback, and I've already got a bit of a solution already proposed in my head. So I would like to do the sooner as opposed to the later. And if we can't make that, then we'll just continue on.
So that would be February 21st.
Okay.
Okay. So do we have excuse me, a motion to continue to February 21st?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. We'll see you next month.
I thought it could be helpful. I hope I wasn't overstepping what commissioner's supposed to do, but I thought,
We're a full-service organization here.
yeah, well, there you go.
Next time up front, tell us you're a renowned expert in Adobe.
You mean at the beginning?
Yeah, that would have.
So am I crossing the line by using you to direct me in the way we
You
want to
can
go?
talk to staff and work it out, and it'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll throw some stuff at you. I'll open
Staff
you
will be
up.
there.
I'm not going to.
No, I don't expect you to, I'm looking for your input on visual things to help appease you guys on the project.
We were just. I don't think we're crossing any kind of line here.
Now, we're not designing, we're just providing design input.
Which is what you do anyway. That's just a little
And
focus.
there's going to be no compensation, so that's
See, it doesn't.
if financial issues start to have big conflicts, and we're not going there.
I'm close as it is, so that's why, I mean, and nothing goes down and everything goes up.
You just have to take whatever we talk about, and it's going to have to go back into the loop with however your drawings are getting.
But you know, we've closed the public hearing now, so we really need to cut this down, and we can have those conversations offline.
Please.
Thank you.
You a member of IATSE?
Enough. We got to go.
Well, middle of next week, I mean, I'm sorry, but
That's fine.
Yeah, talk.
Coordinate with staff.
You guys work. You guys work it out. Email.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Our public hearing's behind us. We will now move on to oral communication. Another opportunity for anyone in the audience who would like to address us. We have one audience member left. Seeing none, we will move to Planning Commission reports. I think one of our planning commissioners has something to say.
If all of you got the memo, this is my last meeting. I resigned from the commission because I've had enough. I've done this, I had two 4-year terms, and this is the second half of my 4th term, so that's 14 years.
Wow.
And I just don't want it anymore. I think, one of the reasons is these kind of projects, you know, I'm just not into facilitating the mansionization of Sierra Madre. And as much as it's nice to make them better, it's just not my interest. And I really don't want to do one Carter again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been trying to talk myself into staying in the commission for 6 months. And when you don't want to come to every meeting anymore, it's like time to say goodbye and get someone who's more enthusiastic. So. That's it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
all
you.
the staff,
Thank
all
you.
the other commissioners. It's been an honor to work with you. It's
You've been great.
You'll be
You've
missed.
been-
a long time. But
Well, we will very much miss you.
Yes, we will.
I remember in my first tour of duty, it took me quite a few years to get up to speed and understand. And when you came on, you seemed to hit the ground running, and I thought that was really impressive. You know, everybody thinks about these things differently and comes at a different viewpoint, and we haven't always seen eye to eye. But every position you've taken is well thought out and fair, and I think that it always makes what you have to say credible and worth considering. And I think that you know, the strength of this commission has always been that we're all going towards the same goal, but we come from 7 different places. And your viewpoint will very much be missed. So thank you for your service. Okay, staff?
I have one thing.
Oh, sorry.
So 25 years ago today, we had the Northridge Earthquake. And 60 people were killed, billions of dollars of loss, hundreds of thousands of buildings were damaged, even up in here in Sierra Madre. And even to this day, we haven't solved all the issues that that earthquake presented us. But we've taken up some of the fight to make sure that Sierra Madre will not be as badly damaged in the future. But it's something that we should all think about, and the people at home should reevaluate your house, make sure that you have good earthquake insurance, make sure that you re-examine the structure of your house. Is it bolted to the ground? And also be aware that the earthquake is going to challenge us tremendously, and you need to have supplies and preparation to be self-sufficient for a number of days before everything is going to be restored. And sadly enough, in some areas, it's going to be months and years before everything is restored. So, you know, use this anniversary to revisit what it is you have to prepare and go back and check it and make sure that you've provided for yourself and your family, you know, because you will be on your own and you will be challenged by us. And by the way, the Northridge earthquake was not a major earthquake. It was a moderate event. And it caused huge amounts of damage and challenges. So we need to use these anniversaries to double down on our preparation and think about exactly what will happen to us if it were to reoccur. So please.
Has there been any anything else happening with the soft story issue?
Yes. Yeah, we've met with staff. We're doing outreach. I've got an email into Lucy Jones. She's working with an organization that actually supports cities in this endeavor. And staff is looking at what our options are and how we can first come up with a credible list of, you know, what is affected, and then, you know, what should our standards be. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good.
In that earthquake, my parents were living over the soft story in Santa Monica.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah, you should have seen everything on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a condo, and they all got together and fixed it, you know. But, man, that shook like hell.
Mhm.
I mean, it was hell.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is a quasi-public service announcement. If anybody's ever had their tree trimmed in town, or because and the city's probably had several of theirs done for free by the Asti Tree Service. We have the loss of a sacred son in this town that there's going to be a service this Saturday for, and Tim Asti will be sorely missed in this community, not only just because we saw him everywhere cutting our trees, but because of the kind of guy he was. And so I just want to make an announcement. If you want to pay respects, it's at Pasadena Nazarene, I believe 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. So.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our hearts go out to his family.
Go ahead.
The American Institute of Architects, of which I'm a past chapter president, is going to be holding its annual Installation and Design Awards program this Saturday evening, of all places, at the Villa at Alverno.
Very nice.
And I'm very, very happy to get the whole chapter there. To you know, the Villa's a 2/3. If you don't know, it's a 2/3 scale replica of a villa in outside of Florence, Italy, that is said to be have been designed by Michelangelo himself. And so this is a fairly unique building with very few opportunities for the public to get in and really check it out. So Anyway, I'm pleased that the Institute is going to be there on Saturday evening.
Okay.
So as you can see, we're starting to get a number of more projects that are coming before the commission. And as we continue projects, we're starting to build up. So we're starting to get a little bit better. So for our next meeting on February 7th, we do have a continued project, which is CETT Lot 22 and Lot 21. Not sure if Lot 21 is going to actually be submitted, but we'll see as we move forward.
And 22 is the one that's closer, right?
Yes, it is. And we have another project, 91 East Bonita, that is also going to be brought before you. It's, again, another design review, discretionary demolition permit and design review permit. It's in addition to a house. Very similar to this. It's quite large.
And those are all three on the first meeting in February?
That's correct. I had one that was moved to February 21st, so we already have 2 items now scheduled for that.
Do you think we'd have time on the 2nd February one to start into the hillside ordinance review?
I believe the city manager would like staff to take a look at that first and then bring recommendations to the commission for your consideration.
Okay.
And that concludes my comments.
Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting.